My coworker, Jill, stood over me at lunch, a smug little smirk on her face. "You'd know all about being shallow," she said, flicking her eyes towards my chest for everyone at the table to see. My blood ran cold. For 3 months, I had endured her whispers, her jokes, her cruelty, but this was the moment she crossed a line she could never uncross. She thought she was shaming me for a cosmetic choice, and when she tried to use her friend in HR to get me fired for finally snapping, she discovered that I don't just get mad, I get organized. If you believe that the best revenge is living well, but the second best revenge is a perfectly executed, evidence-based masterstroke, then you are in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this is a story about how a folder full of paper can be more devastating than any insult. Let's get into it. To understand the end, you have to know the beginning. It started with loss. 4 years ago, when I was just 24, my world tilted on its axis. My mom died of breast cancer. Her death wasn't a singular tragedy in our family, it was a pattern. Both of my grandmothers had been taken by the same disease. It felt less like a risk and more like a countdown. A ticking clock I couldn't hear, but I could feel in my bones. So I went to a specialist. The air in those clinics is always the same, sterile, quiet, heavy with unspoken fears. The screening confirmed the dread I'd been carrying. In one of my breasts, they found them, volatile, potentially cancerous cells, a time bomb. The doctor laid out my options, each one a different path in a life I didn't ask for. Option 1. Watch and wait. Screenings every 3 months, living in a constant state of anxiety, waiting for the word cancerous to become my reality. Option 2. A single mastectomy. Remove the breast with the bad cells, but spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, still heading to regular checkups for the other one. Option 3. The most drastic. A bilateral mastectomy. Remove all of it. Eliminate the risk entirely. I thought of my mom. I remembered the hollowing out of her vibrant spirit, the way the illness stole her piece by piece. I thought about my grandmothers, women I only knew through faded photographs and stories of their strength. I couldn't endure what they did. I wouldn't. I chose option 3. I chose to fight a war before it ever began. The surgery was supposed to be a liberation, and in a medical sense it was, but emotionally, it was a different kind of trauma. They warned me about scarring, but minor was a cruel understatement. I woke up to 2 huge, pink, jagged mountains of scar tissue on my chest, each about an inch long, half an inch wide, raised and angry against my skin. My reflection became a stranger, a funhouse mirror version of me that sent waves of nausea through my stomach. I went into a severe depression. I stopped leaving my apartment. I threw out my mirrors, taping cardboard over the one in the bathroom so I wouldn't accidentally catch a glimpse of the monster I felt I'd become. Looking at myself made me physically sick. My therapist, a kind woman who saw the depth of my pain, did something she said she'd never normally do. She suggested a plastic surgeon, not for vanity, but for sanity. She could see that the scars weren't just on my skin, they were carved into my soul. The surgeon laid out new options. A cream, which did nothing. A laser, which was terrifyingly expensive and came with its own risks. Or implants, a way to reclaim the shape of my body, to hide the violent-looking scars beneath a new, smooth surface. My natural breasts had been an F-cup. I chose a slightly smaller DD. It wasn't about size, it was about feeling whole again. And it worked. The day I could look in the mirror without bursting into tears was the first day of the rest of my life. My confidence, my self-esteem, it all came flooding back. The scars were still there, but they were hidden, a secret battleground that no one else needed to see. I finally felt like myself again. Fast forward to today. I'm 28, working in a standard office. Life is good, stable, quiet, and then there was Jill. The catalyst was innocent enough. An old friend and I were planning a holiday. She made a lighthearted joke about me setting off the metal detectors with my implants. A silly, private moment. But Jill's ears are finely tuned to gossip. She overheard, and that was it. By the end of that day, the entire office knew I'd had a boob job. Not why. Not the cancer, the loss, the depression, the scars. Just the juicy, gossipy part. 6 people confirmed it. Jill was the town crier, and my private medical history was her breaking news. Then, the jokes started. For 3 months, it was a slow-drip torture of comments, always in earshot. Careful. She's got more plastic in her than Barbie. A friend told me she'd referred to me as a sack of silicone. I'd walk into the break room and conversations would stop, followed by a snicker from her corner. I think she assumed I'd gotten them on the NHS for free, on the taxpayer's dime. A vanity project funded by the public. The irony was suffocating. The mastectomy that saved my life was on the NHS. The therapy and implants that saved my sanity were paid for out of my own pocket, money I'd scraped together to feel human again. I tried to shut it down. I confronted her multiple times in the lift, in the women's bathroom, anywhere I could get her alone. I asked her, pleaded with her, to just stop. Each time she'd play dumb, a picture of innocence, but we were always in places with no cameras, no witnesses, and the comments would continue, at least 3 times a week. It was a relentless chipping away at the peace I had fought so hard to build. My breaking point arrived on a Tuesday, October 17th, over a sad desk salad. A few of us were having lunch, including Jill. I made an offhand comment about a TV show character being shallow. Jill saw her opening. "You'd know all about being shallow," she said, her voice dripping with condescension as she gestured right at my chest. Something inside me didn't just snap, it vaporized. The dam of 3 months of patience, of turning the other cheek, of swallowing her bile, it burst. I put my fork down. The entire table went quiet. I looked her dead in the eye. "Do you know why I have these, Jill?" I said, my voice dangerously calm. "A few years ago, doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a double mastectomy. After the surgery, I was left with huge, ugly scars on my chest that I couldn't even look at. I went to a therapist for the crippling depression that followed, and that therapist sent me to a surgeon who suggested implants just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying." I let that hang in the air for a second. I could see the color draining from her face. "So maybe," I finished, "the next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first." Mic drop. I picked up my food, my hands shaking with adrenaline, and walked away. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. About a third of the office came to my desk to offer support, their faces full of sympathy. The rest? They told me I was being a bitch, that Jill was just joking around. My reply was simple. Jill was being a bitch long before I was. Then, at 4 p.m., the email landed in my inbox. The subject line, "Formal meeting request." It was from HR. They wanted to see me the next day to discuss a hostile work environment. The email was signed by a woman named Debbie Carter, Jill's best friend in the HR department. My heart sank. This wasn't just a complaint. It was an ambush. That evening, panic gave way to pure, cold focus. They wanted a hostile work environment. I'd show them what hostility really looked like. Jill and Debbie thought I was an easy target. They thought I would crumble. They had severely underestimated me. They were bringing a knife to a gunfight, and I was about to arm myself with a goddamn arsenal. First, my contract. I vaguely remembered a clause from when I was hired. I tore through my files until I found it, frantically scanning the section on complaints, and there it was, a beautiful, glorious sentence, stating that I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my allocated one was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted the section with a neon yellow marker. Ammunition piece number 1. Next, witnesses. I opened Facebook and messaged every single person who had offered me their support. My message was direct. HR has asked to see me tomorrow. This is serious. Do you remember Jill insulting me, and are you willing to write down what you heard and sign it? I knew it was a big ask. Jill Henderson was feared. She had friends in high places, but the flood of replies restored my faith in humanity. 20 people said yes. 20. Then I started building my own file. I wrote down the approximate dates and times I'd confronted Jill, where we were, what was said. I listed the names of everyone at the lunch table. I was building a fortress of facts, brick by meticulous brick. I barely slept. I got to work early the next morning. One by one, my allies came to my desk, discreetly handing me printed, signed letters. I ended up with 16 of them, 16 sworn statements. They were concise but brutal. Most followed a simple template. My name is Liam Patel. On September 22, 2023, Jill Henderson referred to Sarah as a sack of silicone. I felt this was inappropriate and am willing to go on record that Jill has been discussing Sarah in this manner for 3 months, creating what I feel is a hostile work environment. Signed, Liam Patel. Some went further. They had bullet-pointed lists of other horrible things Jill had said, comments about another coworker's weight, a disgusting anti-Semitic remark about someone else's nose. It turned out I wasn't her only target. I was just the one who fought back. 16 letters. In an office of 45, that's not a majority, it's a rebellion. At 10 a.m. on Wednesday, October 18th, the call came. A jar was ready for me. I picked up my little folder. Inside was the contract page, my list of dates and names, and 16 letters that felt as heavy as gold bars. It was time. I walked in, and there she was, Debbie Carter. She stood up, a predatory smile on her face, ready to lead me into the slaughterhouse. Jill's friend, the executioner. I ignored her completely. I looked directly at the other HR rep in the room and said, "So is my meeting with you then?" Debbie's smile vanished. "No, you're with me," she snapped. "Ah," I said, my voice full of polite regret. "That won't work for me." I pulled the highlighted contract page from my folder. "My contract states I have a right to an impartial overseer." She read it, her eyes narrowing. I held onto the paper tightly, noticing the shredder conveniently located next to her desk. "I can be impartial," she hissed. "I'm sure you believe that," I said, my voice still sweet, "but I have it on good authority that you're a close friend of the person on the other end of this complaint, and the contract is quite clear." She stomped off to get her supervisor. A moment later, a tall, serious-looking man appeared. "Mr. Evans." "How do you know she can't be impartial?" Mr. Evans asked, already looking tired. "Because the person who this complaint is really about, Jill, is her close friend." He looked at Debbie. She didn't deny it. She just repeated, through clenched teeth, "I can be impartial." Mr. Evans took a long, deep breath. The kind of breath that says, "This is going to be a very long day." He gestured to the other HR rep. "You, come with us." And just like that, the ambush was over. My executioner had been disarmed, and now she had to sit and watch as her boss and a neutral party reviewed a case she had clearly expected to close with my termination. As we walked into the meeting room, I saw the look on her face. It was pure, unfiltered homicide. The interview was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. They asked the same questions over and over, phrased in slightly different ways, hoping to trip me up. But I had my folder. I had the truth. "Mr. Evans, you believe Jill Henderson reported you. Why?" "Sarah, because Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now." "Debbie Carter, and why didn't you come to us sooner?" "Sarah, because I had no issue with her. I simply wanted to be left alone." "Mr. Evans, what issue does Jill have with you?" "Sarah, 4 years ago, a specialist identified potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had a double mastectomy. After the surgery, I was left with significant scarring. I went to a therapist for the resulting depression, and that therapist suggested a plastic surgeon, who suggested breast implants to cover the scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have in my file, and my full permission to review. Jill found out about the implants, but not the context. She developed a problem with them, and decided to communicate this problem to our coworkers, repeatedly. Mr. Evans, why do you feel this is true?" This was the moment. I opened my folder. I slid the stack of 16 signed letters across the table. "Sarah, here are 16 signed statements from our coworkers, all testifying that Jill has been making frequent comments about my body for the last 3 months. They include direct quotes, dates, and times." The supervisor picked up the top letter. His eyes widened slightly as he read. Debbie looked like she was going to be sick. "Mr. Evans, what event do you think directly led to the complaint placed against you?" "Sarah, that would be what happened in the lunchroom yesterday. Jill called me shallow while gesturing at my breasts. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll find the footage. I admit I could have handled it better, but after 3 months of harassment, I felt I had to put my foot down. Here's a list of the 6 people at the table. One of their signed accounts of that conversation is in that pile of letters." "Mr. Evans, had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments?" "Sarah, several. Each time I told her I was uncomfortable and asked her to stop." Mr. Evans, leaning forward, "To your knowledge, was Jill ever made aware of your medical history before yesterday?" Sarah, "No, it wasn't her business, and I did not feel the need to detail my private battle with cancer and depression to a coworker simply to avoid her sexual harassment." The word sexual harassment hung in the air. Mr. Evans stood up. "Well," he said, his tone completely changed, "I think we're done here." He shook my hand, thanked me for my thoroughness, and told me they would be in touch after reviewing the evidence. I walked back to my desk, my legs feeling a little shaky, I pulled up my CV, just in case. An hour later, the parade began. First, Olivia Chen, who was at the lunch table, was called into HR. Then the other people from the lunch table, one by one. Then they started calling in the people who wrote the other 15 letters. Finally, at 3:30 p.m., Jill was called in. She was gone for a long time. She came back to her desk fuming, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. I didn't even look up. I just kept working. At 4:30, she was called in again. 5 p.m. rolled around. People were packing up to leave, and then Jill stormed back into the office. Her face was a mask of thunder. She glared at me the entire time she shoved her personal effects into a cardboard box. She got me fired, she hissed to anyone who would listen. She shoved her way onto the lift and was gone. A minute later, a new email dinged in my inbox. It was from HR. Dear Sarah, this email is to inform you that the case has been reviewed and is now considered closed. Case closed. In the end, Jill wasn't fired because I was a bitch. She was fired because she was a bully. She was fired because she created a hostile work environment, not just for me, but for many others. She lit a match, intending to burn me, and ended up setting her own career on fire. I didn't seek revenge. I sought justice, and I learned that the most powerful weapon you can have is the truth, especially when you have it in writing, signed and dated. What's the most satisfying time you ever had to use someone's own rules against them? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories of righteous revenge, and share this with someone who knows the power of keeping receipts. Until next time.